Imagine sitting in a packed movie theater in 1950. The lights go down, the curtain pulls back, and then, from somewhere behind that giant screen, comes a sound so deep, so wide, so impossibly clear, that the hair on the back of your neck stands straight up. That sound did not come from magic. It came from a speaker, and the company that built it once ruled the entire audio world. So what happened to them? To understand the story of Altec Lansing, you have to go back to one man. A man most people have never heard of, even though his work shaped the sound of nearly every major film, concert, and public event in America for decades. His name was James Bullough Lansing. And right from the start, his life was more complicated than you might expect. Lansing was born James Martini in 1902 in Macoupin County, Illinois. He grew up with a deep curiosity about how things worked. The kind of kid who took apart the radio just to see what was inside and somehow put it back together better than before. By the time he was a young man, he had changed his name to James Lansing, a cleaner name, a name that sounded like it belonged on the side of a building. And one day, it would. In the late 1920s, Lansing moved to Los Angeles. This was the era when Hollywood was going through one of the most dramatic transformations in entertainment history. Silent films were dying. The talkies were taking over. And nobody, not the studios, not the theater owners, not the audiences, was entirely prepared for what that meant in terms of sound equipment. The microphones were crude. The amplifiers were unpredictable. And the speakers were the weakest link in the entire chain. Lansing saw the gap, and he walked right through it. In 1927, he founded the Lansing Manufacturing Company in Los Angeles. His goal was simple, but almost impossibly ambitious. He wanted to build the best loudspeaker in the world, and for a while, he came remarkably close. Word traveled fast in Hollywood, because when you found something that worked, everybody needed it immediately. Lansing's speakers started getting attention. They were cleaner, louder, and more reliable than most of what was on the market. Theater owners noticed. Studio engineers noticed. One of his most famous early partnerships was with Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, one of the biggest studios in the world at the time. MGM licensed some of Lansing's driver designs for their own theater equipment. This was a big deal. This was the kind of deal that put a small speaker company on the map. But the 1930s were not kind to everyone. The Great Depression hit the country hard, and even a company making quality products could find itself in serious trouble. Lansing Manufacturing faced financial difficulties. Things got tight, really tight. That is where the story takes its first unexpected turn. Out of the East came a company called All Technical Service Company, known simply as Altec. Their business was servicing Western Electric's sound equipment in theaters across the country. They were not a glamorous company. They were not building the future of audio. They were fixing things, maintaining equipment, keeping the show running. But they were solid, and they had money. And in 1941, they made a move that would define American audio history. Altec acquired Lansing Manufacturing Company, and from that merger, a new company was born, Altec Lansing Corporation. Suddenly, you had Lansing's engineering genius combined with Altec's business infrastructure and nationwide service network. It was one of those rare moments when two very different companies fit together almost perfectly. What Lansing lacked, Altec had. What Altec lacked, Lansing provided. And the timing could not have been more critical. The United States was about to enter World War II, and the military had a desperate need for reliable communications equipment. Altec Lansing pivoted to support the war effort, building microphones and audio components that were used across the armed forces. By the time the war ended, the company had manufacturing experience and quality control standards that most of their competitors simply could not match. They came out of the war ready to build something extraordinary. In 1945, Altec Lansing introduced a product that would cement their legacy for generations. They called it the voice of the theater, and that name was not just marketing. That name was a statement of fact. The voice of the theater speaker system was designed specifically for movie houses. It was big, bold, and powerful in ways that people had never quite experienced before. The system combined a massive woofer for deep bass frequencies with a high-frequency horn that could fill an entire auditorium with crisp, detailed sound without distorting, without losing its shape, without ever sounding harsh or tinny. Theater owners across America started installing them. Then it spread internationally. By the late 1940s and into the 1950s, if you sat in a movie theater and felt that sound wash over you, the kind of sound that made a John Wayne Western feel like the horses were right there in the room with you, there was a very good chance you were listening to Altec Lansing. The A7, the most iconic version of the voice of the theater, became the standard, not just a popular option, the standard. Recording studios used versions of it as reference monitors. Radio stations used Altec equipment. The United States military continued using their products. Altec Lansing was everywhere, and most people had no idea. But here is where the story takes a darker turn. James Lansing himself never quite found peace inside the company that bore his name. After the merger, he stayed on as a designer and engineer, but the corporate environment did not suit him. He was a builder, a tinkerer, a man who thrived when he was creating something new. The politics and structure of a larger organization wore on him. In 1946, just 1 year after the voice of the theater was introduced, James Lansing resigned from Altec Lansing Corporation. He started fresh with a new company that he called James B. Lansing Sound, Incorporated. You might know it by the initials he chose, JBL. The two companies that bore his mark would spend decades competing against each other. But James Lansing himself would not be around to see it play out for long. In September 1949, James Bullo Lansing died at his ranch in California. He was 47 years old. He left behind a world that he had quietly, profoundly changed, and two companies that would carry his ideas forward in very different directions. Even without its founder, Altec Lansing continued to thrive through the 1950s and into the 1960s. This was arguably the height of their power. Professional audio was booming, rock and roll was exploding, concert venues were getting larger, television was growing rapidly. Every single one of these trends required better sound equipment, and Altec Lansing was right there at the center of it all. Their products were found in the NASA mission control rooms. They were in the House of Representatives. They were in the grand cinemas of New York and Chicago and Los Angeles. When the Beatles landed in America in 1964 and played to screaming crowds, the equipment amplifying that historic moment came from companies that had been shaped by the Altec Lansing School of Audio Engineering. The workers at the Altec Lansing factories in those years were craftsmen in the truest sense. Speaker cones were carefully assembled by hand. Magnet assemblies were checked and rechecked. The quality control was intense because the people building these products took genuine pride in what they were making. These were not disposable goods. These were instruments. And the men and women on the factory floor knew the difference. But industries change, and companies that do not change with them have a way of disappearing. In 1969, Altec Lansing was acquired by General Telephone and Electronics, known as GTE. On paper, it was a smart move, folding a specialized audio company into a large communications conglomerate. In practice, it was the beginning of a slow erosion of the things that had made Altec Lansing great. The consumer electronics market was shifting fast. Japanese manufacturers were producing quality audio equipment at prices American factories could not easily match. The professional audio market was growing more competitive. Altec Lansing went through multiple ownership changes over the following decades, each transition carrying the company a little further from its roots. By the 1990s, the Altec Lansing name appeared on something that would have seemed almost unrecognizable to James Lansing himself: plastic computer speakers, the little multimedia setups that sat on either side of a desktop PC. They were not bad products. Some were actually quite good for what they were, but they were a long way from the voice of the theater. The brand changed hands several more times. Production moved away from American factories. The engineering traditions that had been built over decades began to fade. The name survived, but the soul of the company was harder and harder to find. There is something both inspiring and heartbreaking about the story of Altec Lansing. A man changes his name, moves across the country, and builds something genuinely extraordinary. His company fills every great movie theater in America with sound. His products sit inside NASA Mission Control. His work echoes through some of the most important moments in 20th century culture. And then slowly, quietly, the world moves on. But here is what does not disappear. The next time you sit in a theater with great sound, or you hear a speaker system that genuinely moves you, you are listening to the legacy of a tradition that started with a kid in Illinois who wanted to know what was inside the radio. That kid changed everything. If you made it this far, you already know this channel is for you. Hit subscribe, and we will see you next week.